Meg McLaughlin, and she is developed the skill of channeling the spirit of Quan Yin. She is not a trance channeler, and we're going to discuss the difference between partial trance versus full trance channeling. She came into it a little bit later in life after being a mother and raising a child. And I find that particularly interesting because sometimes I'll hear people say wistfully, "Oh, I bet you were always this way." And I love to talk to people who weren't always tuned into special gifts but got it later in life, so we can learn about how that happens and how we develop those skills and how we can embrace it into a lifestyle. It can sometimes be a little bit disruptive when you are living one life. For example, Meg was a scriptwriter for animated children's television series, and then she started channeling, and that's quite a cultural shock to bring into your life and bring into your family, etc. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting for us to find out all this information from her.
Yeah, we're trying to get Meg on the line right now. I have to tell you, it's extremely interesting, though, this system of Quan Yin and her involvement with some of these Eastern spiritual systems. So I'm very looking forward to having Miss McLaughlin really enlighten all of us about this spiritual system from the East that I've never, ever heard of before.
Well, and actually, I'm very interested, too. I see Meg is on. Hi, Meg.
Hi.
Hi. Because I've known Meg for years, but I've never actually been able to grab her and interrogate her about all this interesting material that I find so fascinating as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing her story as well. So thank you for coming on tonight, Meg. I love it.
You're welcome. I'm feeling a little shy now.
Well, not a problem. I have enough bravery for both of us.
Excellent.
So what I'd like to start off with is your sort of before you became a born-again channeler, what was your life as a normal person, an earth person, and what were you doing and what happened that the channeling began?
I was a single mom. And I had a sort of a freelance career writing children's television programs, cartoons mainly, like Spider-Man and Clifford the Big Red Dog and things like that, Incredible Hulk, which was a freelance career, so that largely means I was mostly unemployed. So
right. I understand totally.
A starving single parent living with basically depression and anxiety. Mm-hmm. And I didn't stumble across channeling or stumble across Quan Yin. I sort of stumbled across a meditation practice that somebody told me about, and I went to an intro night and met this teacher and was hooked, not realizing that I, was looking for something or that my life needed reform or saving. But it really did, and I was really quite lucky to stumble across this. So I became a rather avid meditator in fits and starts anyway.
And then let me ask you, before this group, were you doing any kind of spiritual practice at all, or was this the first time you were really even getting into meditation?
This is the first time I was really even getting into meditation. I was not doing anything. I had been raised a Catholic, so, I was in a deep recovery.
Okay. Amazing. So, and what kept you going to the group? Because I know the teacher that you study with, and that kind of meditation is rather strange, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. What was it that kept you coming back, given that this was your first introduction? And also, how did you find the group?
I had a friend that worked in the animation industry with me, and the studio had sort of dissolved and we'd gone our separate ways, but we would get together from time to time. So I met her for lunch one day, and we did our whole lunch and everything, and I was dropping her off at her company, which was on Wilshire Boulevard, so I was kind of double parked. Cars were honking at me, and she was getting out of the car. She turned back and kissed me and said, "Oh, by the way, I went and saw this guy, and he hit me on the back, and I made this noise like this. Oh!" And I said, I want to go. I know.
Love it. That wasn't Jane Ubell by any chance, was it?
No, it was Kim Adelsey.
Okay. Because I actually met our teacher the same way through someone in the industry. Basically, a little story like that also. Very funny.
Yeah.
So you went to the group and you were expecting to be hit on the back and make a noise. And what happened that kept you coming back?
I think it was, there was a tremendous energy of actually being held there. I was not prepared for any of it, and I really didn't think about it at all. I just thought, oh, I like this, and I'm coming back. I mean, there wasn't a lot of consciousness, but looking back, it feels like I was really just held, and it was very comforting to me to, somewhat a mutual friend who came to that first night I went with me couldn't believe that I came back because he said, oh, the teacher was so mean to you. And I said, what? He was? Really? I didn't think so. I thought, oh, he sees me and that feels good. So
that's funny.
Yeah.
Very funny. And so how long were you seeing this teacher before? And we should explain, I study with this teacher also, and there's actually, in a way, two teachers. There is Liang Tan, who is a Chinese man who grew up in Malaysia, who is I would call him a Taoist master, and he trans-channels a spirit named Wang Lo Sensi meaning teacher. And Wang Lo has never been a human. He has always been a spirit. So we kind of study with both of them. And so what was the transition from going to the group into beginning to do more than just attending as a meditator? How did you develop into that?
So it was Liang Tan. He asked me to initiate with him specifically and be sort of his student/apprentice. Mm-hmm. And that was about 8 years into it.
And did you know what that meant at the time?
Oh, no. And it probably would not have mattered at the time because, whatever my ego wanted was what it was going to be, no matter what anybody said to me, right?
Right. Got it. I got it. And did you start channeling right away or what was that like? How long was it before you started channeling, and how were you introduced to the concept? Did Liang say to you one day, hey, you're going to channel, or how did that come about?
Yes. So backing up just a little bit, attending retreats with Liang, he did one specifically that he'd do out in Prim Springs, Tennessee, where it was sort of a more advanced retreat, and he was teaching people to channel their higher selves. So this is like a half trance channel state, just requesting your highest self to come forward. And we would practice, and some could talk and some couldn't, and, offer advice and guidance and energy work, practicing that way. So I sort of I took it a little farther and started doing that for fun, like parlor tricks with my friends. So that was my experience with it. And before I met Liang and the teacher, I had no experience of channeling except that I had seen a video of Ramtha, like when I was 17 or something.
Wow, yeah.
And I used to love to imitate that Ramtha voice, but never thought that I would be channeling. So after I initiated with Liang, he did say, because Liang is very close, he has a very strong place in his heart for Quan Yin, and he had an aunt who channeled Quan Yin, and so he instructed me to do that. So it's by request. It's not that I was walking down a trail, stumbled on a rock, and had a miraculous vision of the Quan Yin. It was through training and request.
Right. Wow. And so after channeling sessions, would Liang give you feedback, or when you say training, was it something other than just practice?
It was just practice.
Okay. All right.
I mean, he would witness it sometimes, and then it was like, okay, little bird.
Right.
on your own.
And so what's the difference between half trance channeling and full trance channeling?
So I would say that full trance channeling is where the channel is not conscious of the proceedings. So, say in Liang Tan's case, he says he kind of goes off to the cave and is not aware of what goes on when Wang Lo Sin Si comes in. For a half trance channel has a level of consciousness while giving over to the energy as it comes in.
So does it sort of feel like you step to the side and there's someone else there with you, kind of feeling?
Yeah, it feels like sort of a downloading of energy, like the energy comes over me. And it's, from time to time, and very much so in the beginning, it's been a struggle to not get too involved in what's going on, and really consciously try to step aside.
Right. I would imagine that would be hard, especially seeing reactions of people sometimes, because when channeled energies come through, oftentimes they deliver messages that can be difficult. And if you're there watching people start to cry because of something you're channeling, that must be difficult.
It's very difficult because the energy of the Quan Yin is very sensitive, very empathic. So even if the person's not crying, sometimes when someone comes before me when I'm channeling and they've got a wounding, it is the sensation of that is overwhelming, where I want to dissolve into weeping, but do consciously try to maintain a professional demeanor. Quan Yin will cry and will shed tears, and she will say, "Let me shed these tears for you."
Oh, nice.
But for me, it's not only the emotional impact, but it's me being afraid, like, wait, you're not going to say that to her, are you? Don't say that.
Right.
Sometimes if I'm watching too closely, I get in a little struggle.
Yeah. Yes. I have that sensation with doing readings sometimes. I have information and I know the person is simply not going to like what I'm going to say. And it's a real struggle to find a way to get through that.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And the way through it is just straight ahead.
Right. Exactly.
Too much thinking is a real problem.
Exactly. I agree with that. When you channel, now I've heard Liang talk, and I know Ramtha is a trance channel through Jay-Z Night also, and I've met some other trance channelers who say that when they are trance channeling and they leave, they go somewhere where they're getting a kind of education while the session is going on. So it's not like they just go into the twilight zone and go to sleep. They're actually getting some kind of training. So is that true with you, Meg? Do you think, is there something that happens to you that you get educated or you get something out of the session?
Well, I will say yes, absolutely, but it's not so esoteric and subtle. I mean, I'm in a position to always be learning. As I try to let the energy come forth and the words come out of my mouth, and that interaction happens with the group or the individual. I know that whatever lesson they're getting is my lesson. And so it's to be open to that is sometimes a challenge, but also very wonderful. But that whole thing of, like I was saying, the ego getting involved, or being afraid of what's being said, or feeling the impact of the energy, all of that is a lesson in flow, for one thing, in trust and belief, and another, and in absolute humility. And every day I am humbled by this process, even though I want big things or little things or whatever it is an absolutely humbling process. And I think that lesson is, until I die, that is going to be my lesson.
And can you explain why that's humbling?
So my probably my biggest problem is my battle with my ego, not in that I'm looking for greatness or that I think I'm great. It's that my worry of doing wrong and wanting to be impactful and wanting to heal and to fix things and to be really wise and put on a big show. you
Right.
know,
Right.
because I do take money for it, and I want it to be worth it to people. And I'm supposed to be helping people. I want to be helping people, so I really want that,
Right.
And I want to look for reflection that that's happening. So that's one way. It's like if I can just, for even the briefest moment, let that go, that's when magic happens. And it has nothing to do with me at all. And I get that lesson over and over again. It's like, forget about it. It's, magic happens when you're not watching the pot, when you're not in charge, when you're just surrendered. And that is an amazing practice in humility to me. The other thing is that people and working with people, sometimes you have clients that are tough and, you get frustrated. Why don't you get it? And that's another time when I'm like, yeah, why don't you get it, Meg? But they are so touching and so amazing given the slightest chance. And people are so kind to me and so accepting. That is absolutely humbling.
Well said. I like all of those descriptions. That's just really, I think, a really intricate description of having any kind of spiritual talent. It is this combination of an ego and wanting to be of service, and at the same time you have to get completely out of the way and let things happen that you really have no control over. You're just like a cord that plugs into one piece of energy, and then you plug into the person and let it flow through you.
Yeah.
Good description. Do you think that anybody can learn to channel?
I think, yes, that anybody can learn to channel. I think that we come in with the same equipment, and I don't know why some people are spontaneous channels and that's their gift or their path in life. I don't know why, but I think anybody could learn to channel at the very least. And that's what I like to teach people, is to, sort of on a daily basis, channel their own inner wisdom. That's what we're doing when we're pursuing a spiritual practice and trying to integrate it with our everyday life.
Well said. So why do you think, well, let me ask this. What was the difference between channeling your higher self and then channeling Quan Yin? How did you know the difference? How could you feel it? And aside from Liang's affection for Quan Yin, is there any other reasons you think that Quan Yin is coming in?
So the difference is that making the request to the Quan Yin energy, that's like I think everybody has that energy in them, and they have that capacity for that compassionate heart of Quan Yin. So I think when I request that energy, it does sort of connect with something in me, but it's like channeling my higher self, only turbocharged.
I see. I see. And if somebody has never been to your workshop and they would say to you, well, who exactly is Quan Yin, and why does Quan Yin come through to us humans? What would you say about that?
Well, I would say, that Quan Yin basically is the bodhisattva of compassion. Some people add the word mercy in there, and it's an archetype that's been around forever, tracing it back to Indian spirituality as Avalokiteshvara, which was a male deity. And then as Buddhism moved toward China, Quan Yin became the feminine entity. And so I think it's the the divine feminine energy, opening the heart to compassion and charity. And I think that, there's a lot of stories about how Quan Yin came about and why she's a bodhisattva and not a Buddha, because she wanted to have the ability, rather than living in nirvana, she wanted to have the ability to come back and help all sentient beings. So she retained this level of bodhisattva so she'd be able to do that. And that's just an example of how giving she is. She sort of refused her Buddhahood so she could still come down and help people. And I think, this divine feminine is very relevant today in people's interest in moving toward greater spirituality and world peace and love and compassion. I mean, I think that's a trend. It's an Age of Aquarius trend that's going on that everybody can relate to. And it's not, I don't think the energy is different from the Mother Mary or all the feminine ideals out there.
Right. Could you say more about the difference between a bodhisattva and Buddha? Is it like, for example, I just recently was told the distinction between being a medium and someone who works with earthbounds, which is what people call ghosts, is that the earthbounds always have a physical manifestation. In other words, they move things around in the house, they rattle things, and there's different issues with ghost bounds as opposed to those who have crossed over, who continue to stay in touch with us on Earth. And then there are those who have crossed over who have moved on, and then there's angelic forces that are not necessarily human at all. So where does the Buddha and Bodhisattva delineations, where do they fall?
Well, I think they're basically talking about levels of attainment and transcendence. So the Bodhisattva has not reached the level of Buddhahood. I mean, I may not be really qualified to talk about this, but this is as I understand it. So Buddhahood would be the ultimate enlightenment, right? And so like Bodhisattva would be a rung under that, as I understand it.
So maybe perhaps more like an angelic force.
Yes, I would say.
Doing service to humanity and lovely. So when you began channeling, how did you explain this to your family and people who know you? Because that must have been quite a change there. I would imagine there was also some change in you as you started channeling on a more regular basis.
I suppose so.
Well, certainly your work changed, from being a freelance scriptwriter to doing this kind of work full time.
Yeah, it certainly did change. And it changed me. I'm a very secretive person, so there aren't that many family members that I've given the full explanation of what I do to. So I'm pretty shy about it, although I have, I don't think I've ever channeled for my mother, for instance, but I definitely do energy sessions with her and healing work with her. And I have done channeling sessions for my sisters, a couple of my sisters and brother-in-laws. And but I posted this on Facebook yesterday, and my cousins shared it, and I'm like, I haven't even ever spoken to my cousins about what I do. And I thought, this is it. This is truly a coming out, isn't it? What if they tune in?
So when you do energy work, is that Quan Yin doing the work, or is that you doing the work, or do you switch off? And
yeah, so if I'm channeling Quan Yin will very often volunteer a sort of energy work or energetic blessing, and that is not enforced by me. and then if it's just me, I will offer that for someone. But I will say this, I think that energy comes in from time to time when I'm in a healing session with somebody. And they will often talk about having more than just my hands on them. They'll feel other pressures or energies. And I think, part of that is just the energy moving, and that's a good session going on. But I think that, we were just talking about angelic forces. I think that that energy comes in to help.
So has Quan Yin ever come in, like say you were with a family member or helping your mother, and then Quan Yin comes in kind of unexpectedly, and then there might be some embarrassment afterwards if somebody says, "What was that?" and it's a family member who's not really sure of the work you do. Have you ever had experiences like that? I know some other trance channelers have sometimes talked about that they sort of have woken up and find everybody crying, and someone came in and they have no clue what happened, and they're like, "What did I do?"
Yeah, no, I'm simply not that surrendered. It has happened where I've been in a session with someone, or in a workshop, and I felt the energy want to come in, and then I decide whether I want to allow it or not. And more often than not, I will allow it. But no, not with family members so much.
And so, two questions about channeling also is, one is, do you ever feel other beings that want to come in? And I know a number of people have expressed fear of this, about once you open yourself up, what's to prevent you from being taken over by, like, David Icke's seventh dimensional reptilian beings or any other evil spirits that are out there?
I don't know. Maybe it's happened. Who's to say I'm really me right now?
Are you eating earthworms or anything?
Yeah, just cherries. But well, while I'm channeling and in that state, I have had other visitors come in or want to come in, and the main one is a warrior aspect that comes in that I kind of associate with my teacher, and then the other one is something comes in that always shows me the image of Ganesh. So I call it Ganesh. And it's a very wonderful, happy energy that doesn't speak English yet.
So, and you're not afraid of some strange, unwelcome, unknown entities grabbing you? And
I really am not afraid of that, because I am twice initiated, so I feel like there's protection and blessing. And then the other side of it is, and this goes back to you asking if everybody can channel, my training is to work on a strong foundation so that I do not lose myself to some other force.
Got it. And what does that mean, double initiated?
So I initiated with the teacher Wang Lo Sin-Si, and I initiated again later with Liang Tan.
Oh, I see. Okay. Did you get a tattoo or anything? I'm kidding.
Well, I do. It's invisible. I actually did get a tattoo.
from both?
Well, yes, from the teacher. He writes on you. And then, yes, Liang did write on me.
Okay. How interesting. And so your daily practice, did you have to get extremely vigilant once you started channeling?
Yes, I have to get extremely vigilant.
or what? What happens if you don't keep up your own practice?
It just doesn't go well. It really wears me out. And it's interesting. That's when the problems of the ego really come in and want to take over.
Oh, okay. Good. I like that you talk about that. One of my biggest pet peeves with spiritual practitioners is a lot of them, to me, do not have a solid foundation, and they don't continue to maintain themselves as well with cleansing and meditating and doing their own growth, etc.
Yeah.
So,
It makes it a harder life, that's for sure, if you don't do it.
yeah, and actually, I was just going to ask you if you felt that, sometimes people say to me, "Oh, you do readings. That's so wonderful." And I'm like, "No, it's not. Life is so much more challenging. It's almost like being a spiritual worker, either a light worker or I call it being a spiritual warrior. It really means that we are taking on a lot more in terms of burning through karma and consciously seeking out to evolve and reach for enlightenment. And therefore, the challenges can get quite complex and strange compared to many people that I know who's, are worried about getting a new car and retirement. Do you find that with channeling that has also sort of intensified your own spiritual path or the amount of growth that you go through?
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. And I think I spent the first 10 years of this resisting and trying to throw as many roadblocks into it as I possibly could.
And what would that look like? What do you mean throwing roadblocks? What did that look like for you?
I wouldn't prepare. I wouldn't, like book my plane tickets on time. I would, have all kinds of stuff try to get in the way. I wouldn't advertise. I wouldn't, I wouldn't keep it neat and try to make it happen. Approached it in a very flaky way.
Got it.
Such was my resistance.
And did you find when you started channeling things like you got mysterious illnesses or you mysteriously got rid of mysterious illnesses? Were there any physical effects that you felt? Do you, for example, I know when I'm doing heavy meditation work, I'm starving afterwards. I've been sitting doing nothing and I'm starving because of the energy that's running through. Are there symptoms or signs or things like that changed for you when you started channeling?
Definitely a lot more eating, which I'm trying to get a handle on. Yeah, I don't know about mysterious illnesses. Sometimes I would temporarily take on stuff from people. I would turn up with their symptoms, but that's very temporary. And I don't think that my health has deteriorated because of it. I feel very much the same, whereas sometimes I get whiny and run down and not very healthy, and then sometimes I'm fine.
Got it. So I also wanted to ask too, because I think this is a question for lots of people who do spiritual work. You did eventually get a husband, and yes, and you were single when you first started. So I know sometimes people say, if you're this spiritual or this is what you do, like as your work and it consumes a lot of your time, do you have to marry a spiritual person or can you not? And like, kind of how does that work out? And I know a lot of times with people with readings, they say, well, how can you even be in a relationship because you always know if the person's lying and, it gets very uneven in some ways. So did you encounter anything around that you could enlighten us about what that's like being a full-time light worker and how you dealt with that or balanced it, or was it just totally okay and normal?
Well, that's so funny because it reminds me of I'll say, discussion I've had a few times with my husband where I basically, accused him of not telling the truth, and he'd say, well, I didn't think it mattered because you knew anyway, because of course you knew anyway, which is like the ultimate cop-out. But that's actually a good point about, I don't go around reading people. I mean, that's my job, and then I rest, right? So I don't go around reading my husband. to
Right.
see if he's behaving or not.
But you have, I mean, at least for me, I know I do the same thing. And I think psychics and people who do energy work, we have this kind of boundary, like therapists. You don't go around therapizing everybody when you're off duty. It's just rude and it's invasive. But I also know that I'm very uncomfortable around people who are talking a lie, like they're saying they're okay and everything's great, and it's not. It's very hard for me to be around that conversation. It's much easier for me to be around somebody who says, I'm not doing well, but I don't want to talk about it. That I can handle better. So I'm wondering if you have any of those kind of sensations. I know you're not reading, but you can never really turn off the empathy that you have and the sensitivity that you have.
Right. Sometimes that comes through, and it's kind of, a little bit of an exercise in minding your own business. And because sometimes, when you catch somebody's mood and you feel like, oh, I must be getting this for a reason. I'm supposed to do something. I'm supposed to intervene. I'm supposed to help. It's like, well, you have to kind of discern what's appropriate and what is help anyway. Sometimes just staying in the room with the person and minding your own business is a help,
Right. And sometimes I found helping looks like you're not the one that's going to help. You let spirit help, and you just have to. For me, I know I have to sometimes feel everything that's going on, and that's it. I have to find a way to hang out with that and be okay with it, because there's really nothing I can or should do about it.
Right, which is exactly what the cultivation of your own practice is about. It's giving you the foundation to be able to do that.
Yeah. It still makes me quite uncomfortable sometimes. So.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Sometimes like, okay, I'm leaving now. I'm going to go sit in the bathroom for 2 days.
Right. I just like to lie down with the TV on.
Exactly. Or a kitty or something. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So if we were to come to a workshop, and by the way, Meg does workshops all over the world. She is based in Pasadena, but she does have workshops in wonderful places like Machu Picchu in Ireland, Copenhagen. I think you went there once. So really wonderful places. So if we were to go to your workshop, what could we expect? What would that be like?
Yeah, so my workshops entail like 2 hours on Friday evening and 5 hours on Saturday and about 3 hours on Sunday. And they start with just Friday evening is like a brief introduction. If any attendees are not familiar with the Samphot meditation practice, and then just channeling of Quan Yin on that evening. And then Saturday would be channeling of Quan Yin. So in those sessions, Quan Yin is very interactive with people in terms of whatever she's teaching that day, whatever her topic is, and helping people move their energy and meditating with them. And she may be giving very direct feedback or general feedback, but there's an energy that's being brought forth that people will sit with. And then when I'm not channeling Quan Yin, it will be sessions with me, and I will be offering instruction on meditation and help with that, and working with subtle energies in terms of balancing and interacting with energies in the environment, and that sort of thing, giving readings. And it's sort of, the time is split a little heavy on the Quan Yin side, and then me working with people.
And the amount of time, the percentage of time spent meditating versus talking, I would imagine varies depending on the workshop and the population that's there. Is that true? Or
yeah, that's exactly true. It's the idea is to kind of show up and decide, just feel and flow with whatever's going on.
Right. And so what is Samphot meditation? It's quite an unusual practice, I believe. What is your description of it?
Well, it's largely Taoist in its history, but it is a practice that basically combines sitting in stillness with the movement of the subtle energies and responding to that movement. So it may entail actual physical movement or vocalizations or the expressions of emotions or all of the above. Talking in tongues is a big one. And all of that is, the word samvat refer to the divine energies of the heart, and all of that practice, that allowing for the expression of energy, is to continue to open the heart and heal all the traumatized aspects of self and integrate, the divine, bring forth the divine and integrate the mundane and grow in terms of your waking life and your sense of spirit, and bringing those two things together.
So it sounds like samvat meditation is very activating. It's not just trying to sit quietly and still the mind and not move like some of the Zen practices.
Quite right.
Okay. I know I've been to some of those meditations, the samvat meditations, and it can be quite shocking sometimes when the entire room was howling and talking in tongues, and sometimes I've had the feeling like I'm in the insane asylum. But because it's, most people, their concept of meditation is like Deepak Chopra, and you open your chakras and you see purple light and the butterflies and the unicorns come. And there are definitely moments like that in samvat meditation, but there's also a lot of what I call rotor-rooter work of clearing out the gunk that is preventing us from connecting to ourself and to a higher source. So it's quite dramatic sometimes.
Yes, so they refer to it as sitting in confrontation with the self.
I love that.
Yeah, and sometimes that confrontation isn't pleasant.
Yeah. So, and sometimes I know when I've gone to workshops with Liang and Wang Lo, sometimes there's a lot of repercussions after the workshop. In other words, it just kind of rumbles on for even a month or two. Can people get some kind of support from you when that happens? How does that work? If, say, I go to a workshop and now my whole life starts shifting around, what does one do with that if they can't take care of themselves just through their own cultivation?
Yeah, well, they can certainly call me or send me an email, and I can help them work through it. We can do private sessions to help them continue working through that, so they can sort of equalize and harmonize with whatever that particular lesson is.
And what do you do in private sessions?
In private sessions, there's the menu basically is you can have an entire session with me channeling Quan Yin, or you can have a little of me, a little of Quan Yin. If you're sitting with me, there will be a combination of meditation, energy work, and reading that will go on.
And when you say readings, what kind of readings do you do?
This is intuitive guidance. Okay. I don't refer to myself as psychic, but I do consider myself intuitive.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And do you ever do anything with these readings? Do you often pick up or ever pick up on health issues that might be happening or might be coming?
Sure. Yeah. And a lot of that, especially if I have someone on the table and I'm, doing some energy balancing with them, that a lot of that comes to the surface. Yeah.
Okay. And so do you ever, aside from running these workshops to take people through an experience, do you offer maybe advanced workshops or specialized workshops where you teach people how to channel, or you teach them how to heal or how to do readings or anything like that?
Yes, definitely teaching people how to do readings, because that's a huge part of what we're doing, is opening intuition in people, and how to heal, working with energy. I don't teach people to channel, and part of that is I think it's really a heavy load, mm-hmm. and you have to have, I feel like, and this is not to say that I'm an incredibly cultivated person, but I'm telling you, it's been a trial by fire. And I do know people who have lost themselves in some ways, and a really strong foundation with a really solid practice of meditating and knowing what your center is, and working through this confrontation of self, as we said. I think someone really needs that. Again, I have a very blessed and magical life, but if someone gave me the choice to choose this today, I don't know if I would. I don't know.
I understand. So how do you teach people to do readings? How do you start to do that?
I think by exposing them to the concept of subtle energy and feeling the movement of energy through their own heart and knowing their center. The opening of that heart makes us sensitive, right? So as you described, sometimes the workshop will kind of rumble on afterwards. That's the opening of that heart. We've remained sensitive, and we want to work with balancing ourselves around that. But that's where intuition comes from opening to that sensitivity of self first, and then relating it to others.
So, but I've seen sometimes people are very shy or scared, and also a lot of ego issues, like not wanting to look bad or say something harmful. How do you actually encourage people to take those first baby steps of practicing a reading? Do you think the energy sets that up, or do you have a certain approach that you like to make it easier for people? It's one thing to study it, but then when you actually have to do it the first time, it can be kind of a big leap.
Yeah, well, we just try to make it as safe a circle as possible when we're getting people to practice this, because everybody has the same thing. And, even people who have practiced over and over, they retain that fear of, I don't know why this is coming up, or what, they always want to qualify it and everything. But you can do it. We'll often do just word games where one person will just say the first word that comes to their mind, and the other person will respond to that word, and it will turn into a very pointed reading of that person. And always just encouraging people, you can't do anything wrong. You can't look to be right. The way that you keep opening and strengthening this intuition is by, number one, not caring.
Right.
Number two, just forging ahead without stopping to qualify and test and make sure. You just say the words and be willing to be wrong, and it primes the pump, and that opens a flow. The more we trust, the more we can just trust it's okay, whatever I say, the more we turn that spigot wide open to flowing with true intuition.
I like that description. That's excellent. You use also, I have noticed, quite a bit of humor. And could you speak to that, about why you think you use humor and what's the benefit of that?
Well, I grew up in a very funny family, and it was a very sarcastic family too. So it's been, I've gotten some lessons from that as well. But I think that for me, when it gets too heavy, I mean, even in having this interview and using some of the words that we use, sometimes I wish I could escape that sort of new agey language sometimes, because it makes me stop and go, what the heck am I doing?
Right.
So I think that laughter from the heart is one of the greatest medicines that we have. And we are talking about healing, and applied in the right way. I mean, there's a when the Quan Yin energy comes in, it used to put people off how crazy her laughter would get. mean, not only is she, responding with the quivering heart and having tears with people, but she's making light. She wants people to make light of their lives, no matter what's going on, because that's how we transcend. So she'll laugh like crazy. She'll make fun of people and laugh. But hopefully with the sense of that loving energy. And it's I think the feedback that I've gotten is that it helps put people at ease. And it helps them feel like, okay, everybody here is basically human. So what am I worried about?
Right. When I have seen your work, I'm always impressed by your willingness to not look normal, and that right. So in other words, it kind of, because sometimes that warrior energy comes in and you're ferocious, you're like, a lioness come to life, and then other times you go into this very, very soft place, and it really, to me, broadcasts a kind of permission to people that we do have a wide range inside of us. And it doesn't mean that we are that way all the time, but it also means we don't have to limit ourselves to always looking proper. And I think that's just so important that sometimes I've met spiritual teachers and they always talk quietly and they wear white robes. And I just think, gosh, I bet they don't even use deodorant. They're just perfect. And that scares me, because I was like, I'll never be like that. Right. So I personally prefer studying with people that show me the range of our capacities instead of what I think my stereotype is of what ascension looks like. Because when I see that, I think I'm never going to get there. I'm never going to be that quiet. I'm never going to be that serene and that surrendering. I'm always going to be a little wacky and goofy. So I like that your teachings are very human and yet very spiritual at the same time. And it somehow, to me, models for people the permission to allow energies to impact us in very profound ways.
Right. Well, thank you for that. It's interesting because talking about earlier how I came into this practice and how it didn't scare me at all that people were rolling around on the floor and howling
right.
at the moon. Like I sort of, there was something in me that was longing for that freedom of expression because I am naturally very shy and secretive and extremely self-conscious. So it's an interesting thing that I would lend myself over to that and continue to do that.
It is amazing. It is absolutely amazing. And doing it drug-free. I'm kidding.
Right. Yes, except for the NyQuil that I use to sleep sometimes.
So, excellent. So, I want to just kind of winding down here. I wanted to find out from you, where do people find you and how do they find your calendar of what's going on, and can they come to a private session? Do you work by phone?
So my calendar is on the Sinsi Center website, which is sinsecenter.com, SINSEE center.com. My calendar is on that, and a lot of explanation about the practice and Wang Lo Sin Si is at that site also. And my email address is there, and email is the best way to get hold of me. And I do private sessions over Skype and over the phone. And look and see, maybe I'll be doing a workshop in a city near you. I've got Portland coming up this weekend and Orlando the weekend after. And then in August, I'll have Atlanta and Memphis and Copenhagen in September.
Wow.
So there's lots of opportunity.
That's fabulous. So, and we have posted on Psychic Access Talk Radio, we have your contact information posted there with your bio so people can find you. And I believe your email address is on the Cincy website as well, correct?
Yes, it is. It is.
Good. And people can come see you with for a private session without having to first attend a workshop?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Fabulous. So, anything else you would like to add to kind of put a message out there to folks to encourage them on their spiritual journey?
Yeah, so I would say that over the years that I've been channeling this Quan Yin energy, her message really has become, loving. When we were talking about the different aspects of self that we'll reveal in this meditation practice, and her message is to love all aspects. It's all good energy. It just needs to be balanced. And the more that you can accept yourself and tolerate yourself and come into love and forgiveness of the self, that is our greatest contribution to this planet.
I love that. I love that the Quan Yin energy that I've seen with you, it does embrace even what we might call the darkness or the dark side or the stuff that we are purging. It isn't about presenting as serene and calm. It's also saying, take that roaring fury in you, or take that depression in you, or take the avoidance in you and bring that to light and embrace that also, because then it kind of melts and dissolves.
Right. In that embrace, it becomes beautiful, and she encourages you to see the beauty in everything.
It does, and it also really helps to increase our compassion and patience with others, because as we can accept the darkness in ourselves or our so-called flaws and begin to see the beauty in them, I've noticed for myself that people who drive me absolutely insane, I have a lot more tolerance for that. Instead of having it drive me insane, it's just like a little tweak now, and then I kind of laugh and say, oh, I've been like that myself. And that is a wonderful gift, to have that kind of compassion and patience without having to fake it with positive thinking. I actually have been able to get there energetically and emotionally, and I think that's a great benefit for the kind of meditation that you teach.
Right. That is peace. That is peace right there.
I agree. Well, I thank you tremendously for making the time for being on the show, and you have been absolutely wonderful. And I love that we were able to look at the inner workings of doing spiritual work, so it's not so mysterious to people, that they can see that it is it has a kind of regular side to it, as well as a challenging side to it, and it has a great deal of benefit to it and a lot of mystery at the same time. So I love that you're willing to reveal all that to everybody. So thank you so much, Meg, for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
All right, and I will talk to you very soon.
All right.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
a lot. Bye-bye.
Hello, my name is Res Miranda. If you're having relationship, career, or life issues, I'm inviting you to experience what it's like to have access to professional, highly accurate psychics and spiritual advisors you can trust to care and help you. Register now to get your free 6-minute reading by telephone or chat. Get answers, get access, psychic access, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. PsychicAccess.com.
Meg McLaughlin, and she is developed the skill of channeling the spirit of Quan Yin. She is not a trance channeler, and we're going to discuss the difference between partial trance versus full trance channeling. She came into it a little bit later in life, after being a mother and raising a child. And I find that particularly interesting, because sometimes I'll hear people say wistfully, oh, I bet you were always this way. And I love to talk to people who weren't always tuned into special gifts, but got it later in life, so we can learn about how that happens and how we develop those skills and how we can embrace it into a lifestyle. It can sometimes be a little bit disruptive when you are living one life. For example, Meg was a scriptwriter for animated children's television series, and then she started channeling, and that's quite a cultural shock to bring into your life and bring into your family, etc. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting for us to find out all this information from her.
Yeah, we're trying to get Meg on the line right now. I have to tell you, it's extremely interesting, though, this system of Quan Yin and her involvement with some of these Eastern spiritual systems. So very looking forward to having Miss McLaughlin really enlighten all of us about this spiritual system from the East that I've never, ever heard of before.
Well, and actually, I'm very interested too. I see Meg is on. Hi, Meg.
Hi.
Hi. Because I've known Meg for years, but I've never actually been able to grab her and interrogate her about all this interesting material that I find so fascinating as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing her story as well. So thank you for coming on tonight, Meg. I love it.
You're welcome. I'm feeling a little shy now.
Well, not a problem. I have enough bravery for both of us.
Excellent.
So, what I'd like to start off with is your sort of before you became a born again channeler, what was your life as a normal person, an earth person, and what were you doing and what happened that the channeling began?
I was a single mom, and I had a sort of a freelance career writing children's television programs, cartoons mainly, like Spider-Man and Clifford the Big Red Dog and things like that, Incredible Hulk, which was a freelance career, so that largely means I was mostly unemployed. So
Right. I understand totally.
a starving single parent living with, basically depression and anxiety. Mm-hmm. And I didn't stumble across channeling or stumble across Quan Yin. I sort of stumbled across a meditation practice that somebody told me about, and I went to an intro night and met this teacher and was hooked, not realizing that I, was looking for something or that my life needed reform or saving, but it really did, and I was really quite lucky to stumble across this. So I became a rather avid meditator in fits and starts anyway.
And then let me ask you, before this group, were you doing any kind of spiritual practice at all, or was this the first time you were really even getting into meditation?
This is the first time I was really even getting into meditation. I was not doing anything. I had been raised a Catholic, so, I was in a deep recovery.
Okay. Amazing. So, and what kept you going to the group?
And some could talk and some couldn't, and, offer advice and guidance and energy work, practicing that way. So I sort of I took it a little farther and started doing that for fun, like parlor tricks with my friends. So that was my experience with it. And before I met Liang and the teacher, I had no experience of channeling except that I had seen a video of Ramtha, like when I was 17 or something.
Wow, yeah.
And I used to love to imitate that Ramtha voice, but never thought that I would be channeling. So after I initiated with Liang, he did say, because Liang is very close, he has a very strong place in his heart for Quan Yin, and he had an aunt who channeled Quan Yin, and so he instructed me to do that. So it's by request. It's not that I was walking down a trail, stumbled on a rock, and had a miraculous vision of the Quan Yin. It was through training and request.
Right. Wow. And so after channeling sessions, would Liang give you feedback, or when you say training, was it something other than just practice?
It was just practice.
Okay. All right.
I mean, he would witness it sometimes, and then it was like, okay, little bird.
Right.
On your own.
And so what's the difference between half trance channeling and full trance channeling?
So I would say that full trance channeling is where the channel is not conscious of the proceedings. So say in Liang Tan's case, he says he kind of goes off to the cave and is not aware of good. So
that's funny.
Yeah.
Very funny. And so how long were you seeing this teacher before And we should explain, I study with this teacher also, and there's actually, in a way, two teachers. There is Liang Tan, who is a Chinese man who grew up in Malaysia, who is I would call him a Taoist master. And he trance channels a spirit named Wang Lo Sensi meaning teacher. And Wang Lo has never been a human. He has always been a spirit. So we kind of study with both of them. And so what was the transition from going to the group into beginning to do more than just attending as a meditator? How did you develop into that?
So it was Liang Tan. He asked me to initiate with him specifically and be sort of his student/apprentice. Mm-hmm. And that was about 8 years into it.
And did you know what that meant at the time?
Oh, no. And it probably would not have mattered at the time because, whatever my ego wanted was what it was going to be, no matter what anybody said to me, right?
Right. Got it. I got it. And did you start channeling right away, or what was that like? How long was it before you started channeling, and how were you introduced to the concept? Did Liang say to you one day, hey, you're going to channel, or how did that come about?
Yes. So backing up just a little bit, attending retreats with Liang, he did one specifically that he'd do out in Prim Springs, Tennessee, where it was sort of a more advanced retreat, and he was teaching people to channel their higher selves. So this is like a half trance channel state, just requesting your highest self to come forward, and we would practice.
Because I know the teacher that you study with, and that kind of meditation is rather strange, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. What was it that kept you coming back, given that this was your first introduction? And also, how did you find the group?
I had a friend that worked in the animation industry with me, and the studio had sort of dissolved and we'd gone our separate ways, but we would get together from time to time. So I met her for lunch one day, and we did our whole lunch and everything, and I was dropping her off at her company, which was on Wilshire Boulevard, so I was kind of double parked. Cars were honking at me, and she was getting out of the car. She turned back and kissed me and said, oh, by the way, I went and saw this guy, and he hit me on the back, and I made this noise like this. Oh! And I said, I want to go. I know.
Love it. That wasn't Jane Ubell by any chance, was it?
No, it was Kim Adelsey.
Okay. Because I actually met our teacher the same way through someone in the industry. Basically, a little story like that also. Very funny.
Yeah.
So you went to the group, and you were expecting to be hit on the back and make a noise. And what happened that kept you coming back?
I think it was, there was a tremendous energy of actually being held there. I was not prepared for any of it, and I really didn't think about it at all. I just thought, oh, I like this, and I'm coming back. Mm-hmm. I mean, there wasn't a lot of consciousness, but looking back, it feels like I was really just held, and it was very comforting to me to, a mutual friend who came to that first night I went with me couldn't believe that I came back because he said, oh, the teacher was so mean to you. And I said, what? He was? Really? I didn't think so. I thought, oh, he sees me, and that feels good.